welcome to Sacred Sexy Signature Talk and how to create one in 7 easy steps. So as you know, I'm KamalaDevi, and I want to start us off with a very interesting story about my signature talk. So I don't know if you have seen my TEDx talk. It's actually called How to Talk About Yourself, Your Sex Life, and Start a Social Revolution. So when I got invited to do this TEDx talk, it was mostly under the guise as a coach for some of my friends who were doing it. I had somebody who was doing it on empathy and another person who was doing it on the masculine, feminine, dance. And I was like, oh, I'll show up and I'll support them and I'll coach them. And the opportunity landed on my shoulders, and it was almost like an afterthought because I was going away to Brazil from the time that I was invited to the day before I was to step on stage and do this talk. So I thought, okay, well, I'm as faculty member for the International School of Temple Arts, I'm going to my core gathering, which means I'll be surrounded by these high level teachers, healers, kinksters, like witches, wizards, all in the area of sacred sexuality. So during this wild, week, I spontaneously downloaded this talk, and of course I had to rehearse it, and so I'm rehearsing it to anybody who would listen. In fact, at one point I remember being in Brazil rehearsing it to a palm tree, and so I'm like, okay, I think I got this. I think I'm ready, and flew home, from Brazil. It was this like epic long flight. And during the flight, I started to feel like, what is it? The day before, we had dove into the waterfalls and swam around, and people are like, oh, the water's so fresh here, you can drink it. And so, of course, the naturalist, the ecosexual being that I am, I'm like, yum, this is wonderful, fresh water from the stream. And my belly was like, So I'm on the airplane and it starts to come out both ends. And I'm just like, oh no, I have a talk tomorrow. So I'm miserable. I don't know if you've ever had Giardia, but it is not kind. So I'm all night long, like it's coming out both ends. I'm like, okay, I made this commitment. I've got this talk, I've practiced it. I'm gonna just go and give it. So when you go to a TEDx event like this, they have like these various speakers and time slots, and we're in the waiting room. And I'm like, okay, it looks like I'm not gonna be on stage for another hour and a half. I just need literally a half-hour nap. If I could just crash for a half hour, I'll get my energy up. So I said to my friend, James, I'm so sorry I'm gonna miss your talk, but I need to lay down. Can I borrow your car keys? Can I just take a nap in your car? Because he had driven me there. He's like, yeah, go ahead. So I take the car keys out there. I stumble out in the parking lot, and I'm like, which car is his? And, I'm so sick, I don't think to push the little beep, beep. So I'm like, oh, I think this is it. Yeah, it has dog hair all over the back of the car. It must be his. He has dogs. So I curled up in the back seat and I napped and just prayed. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this talk. I pray that I'm well enough. And then when the alarm goes off, so discombobulated, I'm like, where am I? What's happening? I get myself up. I leave the car and I'm like, should I lock the car? And I push the button and the beep, beep is like 3 cars away. So I was sleeping in a total stranger's car. I'm like, thank God I didn't wake up and end up in another town. Like I was out in some random person's, Beamer. And so I stumble into the bathroom, I purge, and then they're like, you're up, go, get on the stage. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, what do I need? So I do like this wild hand scream and try to get my energy up, because otherwise I'd be like a talking zombie, right? So I'm doing this emotional release. I'm like, okay. And I just, start the talk. And halfway through the talk, I feel like, okay, I've rehearsed this. I've talked to the palm trees. That's what's coming through. Fortunately, I pulled it off okay. I pulled it off well because I'd rehearsed so much. And if you watch it now and you know this is behind the scenes, right? Like if you watch it and you listen to my voice, you can hear I'm like not well, but I transmitted my message. And the way that that TEDx talk changed my career is pretty significant. So I want to talk to you about benefit, a lot of credentials and respect, and there's lots of benefits. In fact, I'm going to hold that because I want to set a little roadmap for where we're going today and create a container. But the essence of it is that a signature talk for it's something that where you can transmit as much value, to your potential clients and clients, short amount of time. Like a TED Talk is 20 minutes, but your TED Talk could be, or your signature talk could be, 90 minutes or 2 hours. The idea is, what is the area in which you can transmit your expertise in a really kind of packaged way, and then get invited to like keynote at festivals or do podcasts or do conferences, symposiums, like, just YouTube videos if you want. You don't even need to be invited. You can actually just put it out there and start building your own audience. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is the signature talk. And the roadmap, I'm going to go over the 7 easy steps. And that starts with intention. Then 2 is like to have an awesome intro, right? Which I just modeled a personal story that was also very vulnerable. And then we're gonna, in a moment, create the container for the talk. And then there's the juicy body, the body itself, and the design of what's the meat on the menu, right? And then number 5 is that we're going to invite our clients and our prospects to go deeper with us. How do we take this talk and actually convert into, business relations, allies, lead gen. We'll talk all about it. And then the final step is, or the 6th step is to have a powerful conclusion. And then I like on the 7th step to really harvest and leave your clients with a nice aftertaste. So a tin of where we're going. And in order to dive into this roadmap, I just want to wrap my arms around you a little bit, because this particular talk isn't for everyone. And there are lots of like YouTube videos and guides and ebooks about how to do your signature talk that are, part of the larger business conversation. And yet there's something really unique about being, sex educators, tantra teachers, dakinis, hands-on healers. Like there's something about this all the best business advice, but how does that actually apply to our field? That's, with self-pleasuring with others, you're teaching people to self-pleasure, whether you're touching bodies or not, but like the full spectrum. I've had people benefit deeply from doing this who were like entertainers, and then they found like, wow, I can change the direction. So this could take you, but it is very different to be in sacred sexuality and also in business, right? These are like a couple of deep taboos, talking about money and marketing, as well as, sex and spirituality. So the stacking of that creates new complications. And not only that, but the field is changing. like this, it's like the Wild West in a lot of ways. And I can say that as a pioneer who's been doing this work for 20 years. And I've seen like the evolution in, you know, the poly, kinky, queer, they overlap, and I'm watching them, you know, transform, change, shift, which means our work is in demand. It's actually becoming, you know, common. It's like, okay, cool. I've got a massage therapist, or, you know, this barista, and I've got a sexual healer, and I've got, you know, a hairdresser. And it's like, it's considered now with more, it's becoming more of an essential to one's full self-realization. It's like, I think the world is waking up that we can't totally like attain enlightenment if there isn't some degree of embodiment. So those of us who are embodied in our transmissions are being asked to do more work. And so my direction, right, this is pre-pandemic, but I was noticing this huge like demand and this really strong sense of, you know, I can't do all this for myself. Like you know, I've been a sex and relationship coach and speaker and author, and I've got a lot of demand. So when, you know, people come to me now, I'm like, oh, I want to refer them to other mentors and healers. And part of my new direction, which feels really soul aligned for me, is to mentor other healers and teachers, and thereby offer, you know, my expertise. Like, you may or may not know, but you know, I've written a handful of books, and like part of it is like, okay, I want to get these books out to the mainstream. But you also probably know, if you're an embodied teacher, that you can't learn tantra, for example, from a book. Like, it's not the written word, it's actually an embodied experience. So my hope is to, you know, activate other embodied educators, and this talk will help but also, if you have the desire to go deeper with me, I'm going to give you an invitation in this talk, and that will, you know, see if I can support you taking your business to the next level. Okay, so that's actually that step number 5, is that deeper invitation. So the container of our talk is that this is for you if you are, you know, if you identify, you know, as an erotic entrepreneur, somewhere under that rainbow, that umbrella. And, you know, it's not for you get this and have a strong connection to source, and set the container box with a little meditation. Okay, so we're picking up from a meditation. I'm going to invite you into a centering, and this is you know, an important part of the containers I create, even in my signature talks, because it calls in, like, I want to share with you that I do this as much for myself as for the space, but it ensures that the work that we're doing isn't coming from personality and ego. It kind of is a moment in which we set that aside and we open the channel, and then we let love, you know, come through and lead the time together. So with that intention, go ahead and situate your body. And so making whatever micro adjustments will optimize your breath. And full belly breath all the way down to the pelvis. And you can even undulate the pelvis, tilting the tailbone. Softening your breath so that you can extend that tailbone down like a tail. Gently feeling your connection to the earth. Like roots of a tree. Seeking ground. Not just the water table to nourish you, but maybe there's minerals and nourishment beneath you that will support your connection to Gaia. And as we reach down, I invite you to feel this network of roots that connects all of us on this call, all of us listening in the future, beyond time and space, also connecting us to the greater field of sacred sexual healers and teachers and Templars. And drawing that energy up through the spine like a great trunk of a tree into the back of the heart. And up through the branches as you extend out past the atmosphere. It's really opening the upper chakras, expanding into the cosmos. And feeling the great dance of all the celestial bodies that are dancing with this planet Earth. And we're in concert. Just a few more breaths now, feeling as above, so below. This powerful portal of the heart between the heavens and the earth. So while we're connected to the earth and the planets, we can also connect to our core. And from the heart, we pray for alignment with the highest frequency of love that we can access. We invite, evoke, embody love and our leadership. And here we align with our soul purpose. Few deep breaths sounding on the exhale, coming back through the heart. So welcome. As we kind of feel that connection to this bigger calling, and I want a presence that our intention for whatever our signature talk is, that it comes from that place. It's not just the mind. It's like, ooh, I'm really calling in a higher intention. And that's the first ingredient, to this talk is like, what are we creating? What in partnership with spirit or source, like, are we here to do? And so the inquiry of intention is a deep one, because it's one thing to be like, oh, I want to serve love. But how do we know we achieve that? So there's a invisible intention, but there's also the practical and the visible. And as in shamanism, it's like we are a bridge between the invisible world and the visible. And so we want to say, what are the practical evidence that my signature talk landed? And it's a success, I know, because of these, benefits. And so I'm going to share with you that when I did my TED Talk, I mentioned, like, what impact did that have on my business? And I could see the immediate impact by the reach that video got. So like I could have said, oh, wow, I wanted to reach and touch people. But then as I saw on that TEDx site that there was, a lot of people, a lot more than I would reach normally, really resonating, I could actually look at the YouTube number and the thumbs up and be like, okay, there's evidence of my reach, right? But there's also, the invisible, the credibility, the respect, the authority that comes with it. And, some of the other benefits is lead generation, right? So there's people that may see your signature talk and then sign up for your web or sign up for your autoresponder or your email, or to say, hey, let's stay in touch. They reach out and you get those leads as prospects, maybe not immediately, but maybe in the future. So you're establishing relationship with people that you wouldn't normally touch. I actually have booked deals as a result of that TEDx talk. There's people who see it and then they say, oh, will you come and speak at this event or that event? And they give preference to someone who has more visibility. So booking other talks could be your intention, or the results of your intention. You could also have it be that you're wanting to get a book deal. I've had people that are like, ooh, I'm going to talk on my area of expertise and hopefully get a publisher. And you could also, just be like, ooh, I want to just be invited to speak. And I know one of the big benefits of being a public speaker is that I get oftentimes fun vacations, and paid for trips. And it's like, even many of the talks I do in the beginning weren't paid, but they were all expense paid if I was keynote or, whatever the event is. It's a fun way to network. So the inquiry is yours. Before you begin your designing your signature talk, you want to be clear, why am I doing this? And you also want to say, oh, I know this is successful because I got X many of clients as a result, or got this many, discovery calls, or, so actually finding like, what is the result that you're wanting on your end? And then the intention also expands to, so there's the invisible intention, there's the practical intention, and then there's the intention of what do you want your clients to get out of it? And this is really key, because a lot of times it's like, oh, I just want to tell the world how much I know. But people are listening. The radio station they're tuning into is what's in it for me. They want to know, like in this case, and actually this would be a wonderful time. I'd love to take a few examples from those of you who are working on a signature talk. What's the title and what are the benefits that you're giving? Like if somebody shows up to your signature talk, what are they coming away with, right? Like, so in this talk, I'm hoping that you have a 7-step formula of this is how I create my own signature talk. That's my promise. That's what you're going to get. That's in the title. But what about you? What are the kinds of signature talks you're working on? And what is it that you're hoping your clients get from that? So do I have any bold volunteers to share?
Okay, I'll share, even though mine's still in formulation, and it's a working title, right? So permission for pleasure. And what I like on the unseen, I want people to walk away feeling empowered to choose for their own pleasure, like that's safe to do so. and then like practical tools on how to do that, right? Like actual tools they can bring into their life in the moment of questions they can ask themselves to tune into what lights me up. What do I choose in this moment? If I was having my most pleasure-filled, juicy life, what would I choose in this moment?
Great. Excellent example. I love it. Good. Do we have one more example? Yes, Bree.
I mean, I have one that I'm working on, but but it's not in form. It's basically just my brainstorm of ideas, but and also don't have a title yet, but it's all about healthy sexual expression. And and I also really resonate to chakras. So it's kind of merging like how to tie in the different energies we have and how we can open through expressing in those chakras in different ways, and how to create safety in doing that. And what my notes here? Just offering my opinion on what I think it provides for each person personally, and also how it can be of service to the world.
Okay, great. And so that's a beautiful brainstorm, and that's an example of like your, next step is to take it home around, all right, from all of this, what do I want them to walk away with? What do I want my clients to have a takeaway? Like maybe they come away with a new relationship to their chakras. Like that might be it. Or maybe it's, like I want them to self-assess how healthy their sexuality is, so they have more self-awareness, right? Like, and there's a prioritization, because any signature talk I'm writing, I usually have like, there's 10 things I want people to walk away with, but what's the top one that I can actually put in the title? Because the titles to the talks are often the hooks to whether people sign up or not. They're whether your signature talk gets selected for a festival or not. And the titles that have the results in them are the most popular titles. So you want to definitely have, your intention all the way through from the beginning to the end. Right.
Yeah. It would be something around like creating safety in your own sexual expression.
Great. Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So safety is the top, teaching, and that becomes clear from the title, and then it becomes a clear thread that you pull through. If you're teaching chakras, you're also teaching, the nervous system, feeling underneath the energy. You're like, oh, I feel safety under the energy work.
Not necessarily teaching about chakras. It's just teaching all the different styles that people could access to connect with their sexuality.
Great. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great examples. And by the way, I super celebrate both Bree and Arlie being here, because they're two of my love leaders, and it's fun to have you on this public group call. So next we're gonna move into, after intention, some of that opening, right? So you noticed I modeled for you in the beginning of this talk that I was like, let me tell you a story. And the way you start your talk, you want it to be high energy. You want it to reveal who you are, sometimes vulnerable, but also position your expertise. It doesn't have to do all these things, but that initial story is going to grab people's interest. Now, stories are deeply embedded in our evolution as humans. Like, part of how we further the culture is by standing around the campfire. And, if it's a hunting tribe, the little kids would hear hunting stories, like dozens of them all the time before they go out on their first hunt. So the way our species survived was by learning through stories. So we're actually wired for stories. And if you want a really colorful, successful talk, you want not just a great story in the beginning, but you want to weave stories throughout your entire talk. And one recommendation I have here is to have a story journal, which is place where you just, ooh, that would be fun. And maybe there's a couple morals to that story and I can pull that story into different talks or different, scenarios. But actually, capturing stories and bullet points and putting them in your back pocket for when you're on stage or when you get asked a question can increase your relatability and effectiveness as a public speaker like 10 times. Like if you give a talk and you don't have stories, people aren't going to remember it, because stories create emotion and relatability, and then all of a sudden their mirror neurons are firing, yours are firing, and there's bonding that happens through the stories. So the the beginning of your talk is really important. I just call it like, this is step 2, the awesome intro. You want to have high energy. By the way, that's my cat. It wants everyone to know. My cat has a story to tell right now. The introduction is often also like will start you on a good footing. I have to vulnerably admit that when I did that TED Talk, because I was just like I knew I had to get my energy up with the hand scream, but I hadn't used my voice. So when my first words on that TED Talk, you could hear I was hoarse. I hadn't warmed up my voice. I hadn't even, and so there's a little tip on your awesome intro, which is to actually warm yourself up and get ready. And so that then it's just like melted butter by the time that you start sharing. And I'm going to move on, and I welcome any questions as we go. But number 3 is around, we're going off the same. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the container and the roadmap, right? So creating that container in the beginning, I started by sharing, here's the roadmap. And this is like giving people the menu. You want that to be super tasty and enticing and like, ooh, what am I going to order? Where are we going? Or like, it's a 5-course meal and what's coming next. So when you have your talk together, you put titles on these bullet points. And, I'm going to share, because, it's obvious that we would then, have a roadmap for where we're going. But for those of you that are like, how do I even get to a roadmap? I'm going to share my notes, which is like, hey, there's a crazy mind map that it just looks like a big crazy brain dump, which is exactly how I came to, ooh, here's a bunch of ideas. Like, it does not have to be organized perfect, like a perfect menu at first. But then once you've got your mind map and all your ideas on the page, you look at, well, what are the points and how can I title them? And let me structure, the talk with this roadmap. So what that conveys to your listeners is like, oh, I've invested my time and energy to show up to this. A lot of people, if it's an in-person signature talk, they got their butts in the seat, and that, who knows what daycare or what sacrifices they made, they show up. And you want to say to them, I've got you. I'm not wasting your time. I've got a plan. I'm your guide. Here's the roadmap. And then they can relax and go, okay, like this is worth it, right? And in order for them to really relax, they have to know that you have been to where they want to go. So as a guide, maybe it's an adventure you're taking them on, you're going on a journey, but they don't want to have the sense that this is your first time or that you're, just winging it. So part of the creating of the container is letting them know, you should listen to me because, I've been where you want to go, right? And so with you, I mentioned, my my stack of books, which is fun for me to like brag. And it's also a fucking shit ton of work, years. I've been writing for 15 years. And it's like, that I have a body of work to offer. But oftentimes too, that's relevant if I'm doing a writing course. If I'm doing public speaking and performance art, then I make mention of my reality show that I did 2 seasons on Showtime, and I learned so many ego confronting things about putting yourself out there, especially because the reality show was called Polyamory, Married, Dating. So it was where the cameras came into my bedroom. Here's an example. Like they came in and it's a adult cable network. So we got to show, our sexuality, and sharing that about my background is going to be really relevant for anyone who's like an adult entertainer or wanting to come out about their work. They're looking for a mentor who's out. Now, what I'm starting to point at is that the way you position yourself is relevant to what you're teaching. And I have, in all honesty, about 5, I've been doing this for 20 years. So I have 5 signature talks. I have one in polyamory. I have one for writing a book. I have one for tantra and sacred sexuality, specifically one for sex magic. And the idea is after I've done these and I'm known for all of these, depending on what kind of conference or what the emphasis of the film festival is, I can submit that signature talk. And then my bio varies a little bit depending on the listening. And that's a little nuanced for a lot of us who are starting. It's like, put yourself out there, share what experience you have. But what's important here is that you're saying, hey, I'm going to take you on a journey, and the place you want to get to, the place that you are yearning to go to, I've bought the t-shirt. I'm back here to tell you about it. I can take you there, right? So that creates the container. And there's other things like the meditation, or sometimes like now we're on Zoom, I might say, hey, I'm closing the chat so that I can just give you tons of information like a water hose, and you don't have to be distracted by, typing in, or others will be like, open your chat and answer every question, or what is the culture of that time together? Because maybe you want people like, deeply present, often creating the container, say, please stay till the end of the talk, whatever will really, because at the end of the talk, I'm going to give you this great prize or, extra bonus or invitation, whatever it is that will create the container. Okay. Now that they've been oriented, which, it can happen, and it can just be a few words to orient someone, or it can be a whole, depending on how big your talk is, what's relevant. All of these points are, when you have the end in mind, then you adjust the content towards what's going to guide them towards that result. Okay. Number 4, we're moving into the juicy body. And so with this juicy body, it's like, all right, well, what are we really here for? And for those of us who are doing embodiment work, it's often the experiential. So this is the time in which it might be like, all right, part of the setting of the container is that it's clothing optional. And now, and we've set our boundaries, and that part's all, the container setting, the boundaries, fears, desires, all handled. Now let's get naked and dive in, right? Or, I've given you this, the whole menu. This is the meat and the juice. And here's the, breath, sound, movement that's going to accelerate the journey. But if it's just a signature talk, which is actually, what I'm gearing this towards, then what you want to do, just as before, you've got the end in mind. You're trying to create a pathway for where you want your client's next steps, right? So as a guide, you want to look back and say, well, what are the pieces that they need in order to get to where I want them to go? And that is sometimes putting yourself in the beginner's shoes, in their moccasins, and walking through. And during that walkthrough, you want to make it as accessible and relatable by offering case studies, stories, like this story file that I mentioned, this like looking through and being like, well, what's really going to transmit, inspire, educate, and you put that all together. But most importantly, it has emotion. Because if you give them a brain dump, they'll be like, yeah, okay, got it. The mind gets really engaged, but it doesn't impact. Like the emotion is what makes people like really like light up and really relate and really remember, right? So the authenticity is also a really big key, which I think I'm going to just speak it. There's a type of a false authenticity that we can have because authenticity and vulnerability are such buzzwords. And, I am a big fan of Brene Brown's work on, daring greatly and taking these courageous risks. But there's a way in which people then, like their vulnerability and authenticity is another mask. And when we're talking about sexuality and spirituality, like there's a deep call and almost a spiritual obligation to lift that mask and say, here I am naked before you. Because if I'm just standing behind the mask telling you to do that, it's people aren't going to resonate. There's something's not going to ring true. So there's a way in which we have an extra burden of being like, hey, I want my Eros, I want my Shakti and Kundalini to lead this work, not my head and, like the words that I've written on the page. It's like, I want it to lead. And this is, for me, part of the authenticity. And this is totally personal piece. I don't teach anything that I haven't deeply practiced for at least 6 months. So what happens when we read a book and we're like, ooh, these are great ideas, I'm going to put them in my talk, right? And then we transmit that talk is people hear the words, but it doesn't actually vibrate into them in the same way that I'm telling you what my body knows firsthand, and I'm giving that to you. So when you actually go through the exercise of what is it that I can teach, it's not what did I learn last month. It's what am I living, breathing, walking? Because that, if I teach that, the people who are going to come to me are going to be in my resonance. They're the people I can naturally lead. There's the ones that I have like alchemical, like soul medicine. This is where my soul is authentically, and it will attract other souls who are in a similar place on the path, and then we can guide them. And sometimes if we throw our hats and we're like, I want to teach this thing that I don't really know how to practice, it doesn't move people's emotional bodies. Like mentally, they might nod at it, but it's not the same as a real resonance. So, I ask you for like deep, like authentic, like investigation of what is it that I'm mastering? What is it that I'm practicing? What is the gold that I have that's mine, that's uniquely mine? You want the body of your talk to be aligned with your soul and what lights you up. And that'll light other people up as well. So, I'm gonna kind of I'm gonna add a little flavor to this body of the talk. And it's a queuing up of this next piece because we're moving towards like the closing and the sales. And the ingredient I'm adding here is really common in sales conversations, and it's called activate the gap. It's a formula. So often in the storytelling or the sharing or the talk itself, what we'll do is, people will come to your talk because they have a problem, and your talk has a promise of a solution. And then they're like, ooh, I've got the solution to that problem. And they might leave satisfied and never call you, never follow up, never need more from you because it's like, hey, thanks, you answered my problem. But they also may not do the thing. They might not have the healthiest version of their sexuality and do the deep assessment. They may not, be in their pleasure. And, it's like, oh, okay, thanks. You gave me all the information. I'm complete. So activating the gap is pointing out, it's shining a light on the shadow of where they're hurting, where the pain is, where they need to work. And this is super uncomfortable for those of us that are light workers and healers, and we want to make everybody feel good. But if your client or, people who are listening feel great and they're like, oh, I'm doing great, I can pat myself on the back, it's not only not a lost opportunity for a deeper relationship with them because they're not going to come back, but it's also not serving them. It's sort of a pseudo satisfaction, when a real beneficial teaching would put a mirror in front of them so that they could look at, oh, this is where I really am. And I've got some work to do. This is on a map, you are here, and I want to be there. And your body wants to create a vision of what it means to be there. And so as you do that, then they start to feel like, oh, this is uncomfortable. This gap between where I am and where I'm going is super uncomfortable, because now I know I need to work. Like, you're giving them the motivation to kind of close that gap. Now, a good salesperson would say, I'm giving them that motivation so that they hire me. But from a dharmic standpoint, it's like, I want them to evolve. Like, I'm an agent of evolution, and I want them to understand that there's work to do. And they can hire me to do that work, and I'd be happy to show up for it. Or hopefully they'll get another mentor, or they'll turn to their community, or use whatever resources they can. But I don't want to leave them in pseudo satisfaction when the world is calling for us to grow up and show up for something bigger. So this is the activate the gap piece that you want to have in mind when you're doing the body of the talk. And it leads into this next piece, which is, I want to make the numbers correct, the invitation to go deeper. So in number 5, I'm going to model this, but this is really your closing conversation, or an invitation to a buying decision. All right. So in every talk, even if you're like, hey, it's a free talk and I want to just really be generous, there's still an opportunity to say, what is your call to action, right? So even if you're not trying to do a sales signature talk, you want to have a call to action there. Now, most cases, the point of a signature talk is to make an invitation for someone to do deeper work with you. And that's what I'm going to model right now. Now, before I model it, what I'll share is that I have a whole other teaching that I give about the anatomy of the sales call. And there's we could do a whole webinar on this, but the closing conversation can be very nuanced. The most important thing that you get is that you're making an invitation for a deeper relationship, and you're oftentimes, because it's the most vulnerable thing we do, hey, I want to continue to work with you. We get so nervous, we'll fumble when it comes to asking for the money, or we'll forget to say, are you interested? Or would you like to enroll with me? Or can we schedule that? That's the actual call to action. And so you want to rehearse your call to action. And you want to rehearse it in the shower. You want to rehearse it while talking to palm trees. It doesn't matter. You want to actually just, get it down. So at that moment that you are in your speech, when you're like, hey, if you resonate with this and you'd like to go the extra mile, I'd like to make an invitation to you to do deeper work with me. And you want it to roll off your tongue. So that practice is one that, is beyond the scope of this call, but something for you to get, extra support and accountability around doing. So in my closing conversation, what part of the reason that I designed this 7 steps to the sacred sexy signature talk was because I'm inviting potential love leaders to join my career coven. So I have a year-long membership or mentorship, it's a 1-year mastermind mentorship, closed group. And that journey is for people who, right now, if you're going through these 7 steps and you're going, wow, there's a lot of pieces I don't have in place. I don't know who my audience is. I don't know how to make an offer. Like, how do I do these things? If you want to take, this to the next level, then over a year with, about a dozen other reflections and sacred sexual healers who are in deep conversation, we get the community and my mentorship, and you get the clarity. This is really key. Like, this year-long mentorship gives you clear steps of here's what I need to do next, and here's where the missing ingredients are, and where my superpowers are. So you get the clarity, and then you get the accountability, right? Which is people who are actually saying, so how's your homework? How's it going? What do you need help with, right? And all those ingredients together can take your entrepreneurship to the next level. So that's what I'm inviting you into, is a year-long mentorship. But before you do that, in the doorway, the threshold of that year-long is to actually have a one-on-one conversation with me. So the invitation is to do a discovery call or breakthrough session. So 1 hour, it's a $250 mentoring, time where I can look at your work and I can say, okay, here's where I would upgrade it in the coming year. And in that 1 hour time, we really, start to vision what's possible, where your gifts are, where your limitations are. And if you choose, not to continue with me, there's no further charge. It's just like you get a lot of value from that time together. And then if you do want to go deeper with me on that call, we would go through the details of what it looks like to do the mentorship. We would talk about the every other week, how we meet twice a month, and then there's 4 private sessions with me, and there's different levels of it. So we'd go through all of that. What I want you to know in this invitation is that I have people in that call who are like, oh, I'm doing body work and I didn't realize that working with men drains my energy, and now I'm starting to build my business all around women. Or, people who are like, hey, I didn't realize I was in the closet and that was really draining me, and I want to have a congruent branding of who I am in the world, and we can support them in that. And so I'm seeing transformation left and right. I don't know what your transformation will be, but you bring your whole self to the course and you get in an alignment with your soul's shine and your soul purpose. So I hope by the end of this session, you send me a message and we'll schedule you. In fact, I've only got a few sessions left before I travel, so we'll schedule you for an appointment for the next season's enrollment. I look forward to it. So the example I just gave you of a closing conversation always ends with a call to action. Click this button, schedule here, do that. Like, what is it that you want your clients to do next? And then you can actually go to number 6, which is conclusion. Powerful conclusion is where you kind of review, like, here's all the steps of the call. Or the talk included these points. Let's remind you so that you can kind of wrap it up and take it home, because we want people to have the most powerful takeaway. So the conclusion of this is that we went over, welcome Tal and Alex, we went over the multiple dimensions of intention, right? When we're creating the talk, what are we intending inside and out? Number 2 is how to create an awesome intro so that, people are really excited about, the journey you're taking them on. And 3 is the actual container, that we're creating guard rails or riverbanks so that you can, flow the river of content that you want to share. And then number 4 is that juicy body, right? So you have the whole journey that you're going on and what's included. And that can originally be a really messy mind map. And it can also be really spontaneous. But it's at least the content, the content that you're giving, the meat of it. And then number 5 is where you give them an invitation to go deeper. And number 6 is that powerful, conclusion where you wrap it up. And I don't think conclusions are complete in my book unless you really give people the opportunity to reflect on what are their next steps. Okay? So it's great because I can tell you all that I know, but that's only as good as what are you going to apply next, right? So your next step from these 7 steps I just gave you is to self-assess and say, oh, do I have a title for my talk? Do I even know the subject, right? And if not, my next step is to brainstorm all the things on which I could just talk for 20 minutes to 2 hours. Number 2 is like self-assess is like, do I have stories and, an awesome, how do I want to start it? The intro, like so go through these 7 steps, asking yourself as a self-assessment, what's missing? Because the truth is, if nothing's missing, you'd have your talk already. But you might go, wow, I don't even know what my invitation is or who my clients are or what the offer is. And that's when, you'll kind of identify your homework. And so then, I like to do a harvest at the end, which is to ask people, and this is my $1 million question, right? Doesn't matter what kind of seminar or coaching, I always ask, and a lot of you who work with me will smile because it's like, sometimes I'll just be like, okay, the $1 million question, what's the most valuable thing you got in this session? And I don't even need to say it with my clients that I've worked with. They're like, oh, here's the most valuable thing. Here's my takeaway, right? So we're going to take a moment to ask for takeaways here and see what you got. But I also want to open to any questions. Actually, let's do that first, questions, and so that the aftertaste will be the takeaways. What would you like to know that will support you in rocking your signature talk? Good, Arlie.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is,
before you go, Arlie, yeah. I just wanted to check with, for Maha's sake, are you okay if we have you on the video? Are you okay being videoed as
me? Yeah. Sorry, I'm like.
No problem. If anybody is not okay and they're going to ask a question, turn your video off, ask the question. We can hear you great. But I want to just give Maha, thank you for being my engineer who's going to record you. Go ahead.
Okay. So do you start with like a time in mind? Because it's like just writing out one possible topic. I'm like, this could be a 20-minute talk, but really like I don't know how long TEDx talks are typically, like 3 to 5?
12 minutes. Yeah.
12 minutes.
Yeah.
So is there like a time that you recommend, at least like the first talk being that we create?
So I would start with, what is it that my soul wants to share to the world? Like, what is the subject? And then I would say to myself, okay, like if I were doing a TEDx talk, then sure, less than 20 minutes. Generally speaking, you want to do an hour. Like typically, because there's intro and there's out, like it's really going to be like a 45-minute talk because you want room for questions at the end. But a lot of these tantra festivals now have these 90-minute slots. Because of being a keynote, I've often been asked to talk for 3 hours. And so it's not depending on the topic. It's like I take the topic and I do different versions of it depending on what my outcome is. And for those of us who are just doing it for our own YouTube channel, you can make it any length you want, unless you're pro YouTube. And pro YouTube, you want, like if you're monetizing, you want to do it for 15 minutes, because then you get enough time to get the multiple ads, which you get paid for.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. That's so helpful. And then if you are doing a live talk, how do you do takeaways? Do you actually ask the people live? Like it's easier in here, like either people putting it into a chat or.
Sorry, I got technically distracted. So your question again is, takeaways.
The
Yeah.
takeaways and like harvesting, like asking that $1 million question.
Yeah. So
That
we'll
differ when you do it in live in person, or if you're on a stage. I'm thinking more like that, like you're on a stage and there's an audience.
Great. So I've worked, when I was at the Purpose Summit, for example, there was like, you know, like a huge auditorium, lights in my eyes. I couldn't even fucking see who was in the audience, right? And so I say, great, we're wrapping up. I want you to turn to a partner and you're going to have 5 minutes to share what's the most valuable thing you got out of this talk. And so then I was up there drinking my water, kind of going like, can I see anything? Like, I didn't even know, right? But I know that the reason they do the harvest is they'll come away getting more value because they're articulating their own takeaway. And if I don't ask that question, they'll be like, that was great, but I don't remember what I got, right? So it's actually not just like, sometimes I'll be like, cool, what did you tell me? And then I pat myself on the back for, I gave a great talk and they got all this value. But it's not about me, it's about them actually doing the thing.
Yeah, integrating it, because when you have to speak it, it just like lands in you different. So thank you for that tip of turning to an audience member. That's beautiful.
Great, thank you. Okay, so who else has a question? Bree.
Hey, yeah. I guess I was curious, this might be a bit of a fear coming up, but like, what if what I feel like I have to say has already been said before? So it has. I know everything everybody says has likely been said before. So how important is it to create either a process or an interaction, some sort of icebreaker that creates uniqueness to you? Is that a really important part of a signature talk?
Good, okay, cool. So what this question tells me isn't so much your fear, right? It's you are a creative being. Like, just as the singer, as the artist that you are, that you fucking value originality.
Yeah.
Really important to you. And so, you know, my answer is actually like, the reason that's coming up is because your soul's not going to be happy unless there's a degree of like feeling like, I put my soul into this. I didn't just regurgitate other people's information. Like, I want to share something that's from my heart. And so there is a degree to which, like, I'm giving you a 7-point formula, but like, you have to, they say, like the bling that you add, like you might have a stock car, but you got to change the hubcaps and put the spoiler on, like make it your own. And the degree to which you bling out your vehicle has to do with your own standard of creativity, right? And so yours will likely be more original than someone else's. But the important piece here is like, this idea that I'm going to create the first and the original is like, that's all ego. When we really kind of get caught in that, it's just our personality wanting to be significant. But if it's our soul wanting to shine, then I'd say go for it and really track the difference. And the important thing, especially because your talk is about safety and about boundaries and like, you know, health, like that fucking needs to be said again and again from a million different people. It's just not spoken about enough. The world needs to hear it. And it doesn't need to hear it for the first time and only time. It's like, this is just an ongoing important conversation, no matter who it's coming through.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, exciting. So what I'd like to do is that harvest, but I'm going to take an extra moment to do a little group share, like just a 5-minute breakout. Hold on, let's do 6 minutes. Yeah, 5-minute breakout. 6 minutes total with 3 people. So it's like two minutes each for you to share what's the most valuable thing that you got. So you get to articulate that in your small group, and then we'll come back and just do a closing harvest. And if any other questions come up, I'm still open. We have time for that. All right, so Maha is making some groups, and we're going to invite you in. And it'd be nice, you know, upon closing, before we close, if you do have the title to your talk or a theme for your talk, and you want to share that, we'd love to hear that when we come back for the harvest of this harvest. Okay, join a break room is at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that. Great. Welcome back. So I'm curious if we have any shares that are anything you learned about yourself in that you want to share with the group. Love to hear it. Also open to any questions that might have come up.
Hey, loves. Totally okay to be on camera and recorded.
Great.
It's Riva. And yeah, I'm just sitting with something that's really alive for me, which I spoke to my group, which is like really appreciating like your kind of like thorough engagement in this field for the last 20 years and like being able to connect with someone who understands kinds of the in and outs of what is it to bring sexuality into the online world, into spaces where it's deeply censored. And just having this deep appreciation that you are holding this niche because I felt really lost kind of with my other spiritual business coaches as much as I love them and have loved what I've learned. And there's just a way that you're speaking, even though I've been kicked out of this multiple times from bus Wi-Fi and everything, that just feels really resonant. I'm just really appreciative of you holding this. So thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah. Other reflections?
I'll go. I'm super grateful because even though we did go over this in one of our love leadership calls, like there's so much juice. There's so many beautiful things that didn't totally land the first time. So getting to hear it all over again, like I really have more of an embodied sense of like how to bring in all the things I already do naturally, which is like speaking to the energetics, embodying the energy that I want people to experience, bringing in like personal stories. Like I do that all naturally. And that was really exciting to see. But then I love now having the sense of like the actual practical things, especially about setting like just my personal intention of like, I want to co-create getting paid as a speaker. Like I hadn't done that, and that's very exciting. And also how you really left us with like a bite-sized piece at the very end of like going through the 7 steps and asking myself what I'm missing. Like that took me out of any sense of overwhelm. So I'm really grateful.
Good. Thank you. That's excellent. I was thinking, I'm going to remove your spotlight, but thank you. I was thinking about it too, because I just gave this talk to my intimate career coven. We get really deep. And I thought this is really valuable to a larger audience. So I'm going to put it out there publicly. But the difference, how we show up as speakers differently when there's a different listening. And one of the differences I'm going to highlight, almost like a PS, is that there's a way, because we had just talked about the anatomy of a sales call, there's a way that teaching the sales and layering it into the signature talk, like there's a craft to doing that. And what I didn't mention in this call, and I will now, is that when you're doing your menu, like here's our roadmap of where we're going. If you're going to have a sales call anywhere in your menu, when you're on stage or anywhere, you want to tell them up front that I will make an invitation to do deeper work with you, or I will be inviting you to join my love leadership. Or by offering them that in the roadmap, they then go, okay, got it. It's not later they feel betrayed. Like you gave me all this in order to, get me enrolled. It's like, it's like you're setting the expectation field, and then it comes really naturally for you to make that invitation. It's not like anyone's like, why are you selling me on something? It's like, oh, I told you I would, now I'm doing it. And then I'm going to give you an extra line, which is from the Anatomy of the Soul of the Sales Call. And I want you to feel into this because, it's just so relevant for, I have just shared my deepest offering with you. And I want you to know it's not for everyone. So I want you to feel into your belly, like in your body, and just sit with, like, is that right for me? Do I recognize myself in that? Can I benefit from, a very personalized call where KamalaDevi looks at my work and visions with me? Like, is that for me? Because it's not for everyone. And I want that to come from your strong sense of, this is what my next step is, as opposed to my charisma, because I'm like, oh, it's great, everyone should do it. It's more like, no, this is a very individualized invitation. And I really only have 5 spots left to have those conversations before I go. So I want to make sure that it goes to the people who are most resonant with it. So I wanted to model that as a sacred sexual healer practitioner, there's so much shame about talking about sales and marketing and self-promotion that those two things sometimes are like, I can't do it. So we need to be able to do it in our own languaging, in our own congruent way, and to actually ask people to breathe into their body, to meditate, to see if it's true for them. Like, that's how we, as practitioners, maintain our integrity. We're not here just pushing and marketing and saying it's for everyone. We're actually here saying, I'm sending out a bat signal. This is my soul shine. Like, are you resonant? And if you are, then I trust that. And that way, every time I do a talk like this, and if, for example, if no one, well, today, like, I was like, oh, it's an intimate group. And then there's that moment where I go, I've been sending out the bat signal, and the people who showed up are the perfect people. Like, if no one takes me up on that call, it wasn't meant to be. I don't have it like, what I do wrong? I have it like, oh, that's just the integrity piece, right? So yeah, that's my PS. That's some of the more intimate teachings I went with my group that I didn't go into here. And I'd love to hear if there's another takeaway or harvest that you want to share with the whole group. Do we have 1 or 2 more? Great.
Yeah, my harvest was just, it kind of wasn't a big piece that you touched on, but it resonated with me very deeply because I have a tendency to get overwhelmed, especially with things that are structured. And it was actually this more like broader review when I'm creating a signature talk, to really begin with the end in mind. And so if you start at your end point, like what is my intention? What do I really want people to walk away from after being a part of this talk? I can kind of track everything that I've planned and make sure that it's all congruent and it is actually serving the greater purpose of what my intention is for that talk. So really kind of working backwards feels like that really supports me in the way that I operate in creating things like this.
Great. Beautiful.
I just want to say my harvest was that I come from an academic background. So when I think of a talk, I think of it very in my head. And so like coming from my head and my intellect. So the invitation to bring emotionality and stories and just the power of that really struck me, and is something that I'm going to be taking with me as I create a talk. Just that seems really important.
Do you have a sense, Kelly, of what your talk might be on?
Oh gosh, I have a lot of ideas. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about recently is jealousy, and like transforming our relationship with jealousy, thinking a lot about and experiencing, doing a lot of self-work around. So that's been something that I'm thinking about. I don't know, it's one option.
Yeah, that is definitely needed and also very emotional and rich for lots of stories.
Yes. Yeah, there was definitely some connections there for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, if we think back at our best, our favorite teachers, like who has had the biggest impact on us, I bet it's people who were good storytellers and whose teachings were emotional, because that's it's how masters like Jesus and Muhammad, and like there's a parable that they transmit, and then it lasts the test of time. It really stays with us. Good. So I'm going to take a final harvest. What's the most valuable thing you got from today? One last person who wants to share. Good, Habib.
Yeah, for me, I think the key piece that you talked about was that resonated with me a lot was while preparing for your signature talk, was keeping in mind what's in it for them, because that's actually the key piece that can make or break your perception as a speaker you're trying to build through that talk, and the value that
I'm going to pause you because your audio is not real clear, but I definitely hear the what's in it for me was your takeaway. Is there anything else for closure, because it's hard on the ears? Okay, I'm delighted you're with us, and I know you had to cross mad time zones to stay here with us, and so I love it that you showed up. Sorry, I can't hear you well, but thank you. Okay, good. So as we're closing a little, I'm delighted to have answered your questions, delivered, my gifts. And what I want for you ultimately is an ongoing alignment, whether or not it's with me as your mentor, like a deep listening to, what would love have me do? Like, who would love have me be? Who can I meet and serve, and to just really put love in the center and keep following that, because that's ultimately going to lead your business in the direction that's going to be congruent with who you are and what you're here for. And I totally welcome your getting business advice from multiple sources, because there aren't a whole lot of sacred sexual guides, and to keep passing that advice through the filter of, if I follow love, does it take me in this direction? And to keep following that, because ultimately the greatest satisfaction and service, is coming from that core, from the courage to follow that thing out. As outrageous as love may make asks of you, just continue to lean in and follow it. So blessings. It's been a pleasure. Mwah.